Your mother asks you to get something from the basement, but you're hesitant. You stand at the top of the stairs leading down into the abyssal dark. As if the odds are against you, there is no light switch on the wall. Rather, the light waits in the middle of the basement at the bottom, a string swaying somehow in the breezeless room. Step by step, you make your way down. 1 step, 2 steps, 3, 4, until you're at the last of them. Just run in and grab what your mother wanted, you tell yourself, but you can't move. There's something wrapped around your ankle, and it feels eerily similar to a hand. Enjoy these 10 allegedly true scary basement stories with our special guest, Shaded Masters. If you enjoy her talented work, click that link in the description and give her your sub. Remember to click subscribe and the notification bell here as well. If you are subscribed, leave a like and follow me at Dark Prevails on Twitter, and you'll never miss another scary story. 1. The Red Face by Lexi99. This happened a few years ago when I was about 14 or 15. My parents are not together anymore, and my dad lives in his parents' basement due to financial problems from mistakes he made in the past. My parents had me right out of high school, so they were both very young. Because of his age and living with my grandparents, I've always felt like my dad was more of a brother than a father. He loved to scare me when I was a kid, and he still does. He would always watch scary movies with me, and he'd wear Halloween masks around the house and try to jump out at me. As I got older, he would even wait for me to get home and hide behind a tree in our yard, then jump out at me just to see my reaction. At first, my dad scaring me all the time made me a scaredy cat about everything. I was basically scared of my own shadow. As I got older though, my dad told me he was trying to scare me so much that it would be harder to scare me when I was older. I think it worked. As a 5'2", 110-pound girl, I don't easily scare anymore. I'm probably more confident than I should be if I find myself in a bad situation. And as messed up as it sounds, I have my dad to thank for that. But this story takes place when I was still scared of my own shadow. My dad smokes and wasn't allowed to smoke in the house, so he would have to go outside no matter how late it was. Anytime my dad was outside, he'd yell at me to come here and try to tell me that someone was outside and in the woods by our house. Or he'd run and say someone was after him. Of course, I knew he was joking, but I was still afraid. One time, he even locked me outside and told me people in the woods were coming for me. I even had to slam on the door to wake my grandparents to let me in. My experience happened very late one night. I was in the basement with my father. He was asleep on one couch, and I was watching South Park on the other. All of a sudden, I began to hear tapping sounds coming from one of the basement windows. At first, I didn't think much of it. Probably some animal, I thought. But then it grew stronger and sounded more like rocks being thrown at the windows in the basement. I ran upstairs to my room as fast as my short legs could carry me. I decided not to wake up my dad because he had work in the morning, and my grandparents would just shrug off the incident if I woke them up. So I thought it'd be a good idea to call my boyfriend and tell him what happened, because it would make me feel better. My bedroom was far from the basement. It was on the 2nd floor. But the house is built on a hill, so my window was actually close to the ground outside. As I was on my phone with my boyfriend, it suddenly grew unnaturally quiet. The nighttime sounds outside stopped. I could no longer hear the bugs chirping anymore. It was like that silent moment right before something terrible happens in a scary movie. Then, out of nowhere. A blood-curdling scream came right from outside my window. It sounded like something from a horror movie. Even my boyfriend heard it on the other end. I hung up and ran straight to my dad in the basement. I've never been so shaken in my life. I told him I thought someone was outside and explained everything to him. He grabbed a kitchen knife from under the couch because he's paranoid and often sleeps with something nearby. We both went outside into the black. It was hard to see anything, but we could hear a lot. Sounds like someone was walking through the leaves, like there was more than one of them, and they were all around us. I stayed behind my dad as he went further in the yard. I then remembered my phone and took it from my pocket and began to take pictures all around us to get anything. Eventually, my dad told me to get inside, and I waited a few minutes for him to follow. He said he hadn't seen anyone, but someone was definitely out there. Now, my dad had often taken pictures outside with his phone. You'd see orbs of all kinds of weird-looking mists and things in his pictures, but I always thought he added them. I was never more wrong in my life. I told my dad I took pictures on my phone, so maybe we got a glimpse of the guy. When we began looking through all the pictures, we noticed a red dot in the background of one of them. I don't think it was human, because we never saw anyone out there. I've always felt like I'm being watched when I'm at my dad's, especially in the basement or outside at night, but I always thought it was my imagination or just being overly scared. This whole time, the stuff he said at night to try to scare me, the pictures he took, and him saying someone was outside, I thought they were pranks. I never once thought it could actually be true. I don't know what scares me more, the fact that I caught something in my picture, or the fact that my dad locked me outside in the middle of the night, all alone with that thing out there. 2. The Squatter, by the author shown on screen and read by Shaded Masters.
I used to live in an old farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. Not creepy at all. I found it quite peaceful, actually. However, after I moved, I realised I should have paid just a bit more attention, or have done things differently. I moved in when I was 10 years old. At the age of 14 or 15, I started smelling something rotting when I'd go to sleep. I had a relatively low-sitting bed, and where my head would rest was a small ventilation duct. I'd complain to my parents and they'd have several exterminators go down and check it out. My theory were rats climbing into the ductwork, getting lost, then dying. That would explain the smell. I say rats because at night I'd also hear little scratching sounds. Part of me thought rats, and the other part of me thought it was a super haunted house. Besides the scratching, I would hear my doors open at night and what sounded like footsteps. I could make out visible shadows in the room. I developed an unnatural fear of the dark, and with my constant complaints about the ghost in my room, I was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Fast forward about another 5 years. I moved out of the house by then, but ended up house-sitting from time to time. This night, I was house-sitting with a friend over, and we hear the scratches. Finally, someone to bear witness to the insanity I've been accused of. We noticed, however, the scratches were coming from my room, and eventually made their way around the entire house, like someone tapping their nails on the outside of the house. We eventually hear the doorknob to my garage, located in the kitchen, begin to rattle just faintly. My friend and I bolted out of there. I told my parents what happened and that I had a witness this time. They said they were 5 minutes away and on their way home anyway. I could leave. While I'm sitting in my car miles away, still freaked out, I get a call from my dad. He's screaming and sobbing, asking where his dog is. The whole reason I house sit is to watch her. I told him she was there when I left. While he's losing his shit over his dog, my mum calls the police. When they get there, they do a sweep of my house. My family and I are now reunited on the front lawn waiting for the police. When they come out, they inform us that my room's crawl space had been opened and my closet door wide open. Upon closer inspection, they knew right away that a squatter was living under our house. They found a knife, some rope, and a pack of cigarettes. It appeared the squatter was roaming around outside, which is extra gross because that means when we bolted, we were out there with him. He seemed to have entered my crawl space when he realised he couldn't get in. Once he was in the house, he began to rob it. He took my dog, who we found whimpering in the shed where he stuck her. He was trying to remove the TV but was interrupted when my parents came back home. He then made an exit through my window. The police were unable to locate him and didn't investigate any further than that. They never found him. For years, I was called crazy and slapped full of medication that fried my brain and gave me the onset of Parkinson's. I'm still scared of the dark, can't sleep with my windows open, and nail or lock any accesses to my house. I can't sleep alone or without a nightlight and a TV going now. I can't stand the sight of open doors and double-check their locks. The shittiest thing is, no one even gives a fuck. No apologies for calling me crazy or pumping me full of psych medicines that made me see sounds. Hell, my mother doesn't even remember any of this happening, and my friend doesn't even really care that it did. If it weren't for my best friend, I'd think I was still fucking crazy and making this up.
3. The Truck by Rebeka. My grandparents had recently moved into the family house due to some passings in the family that led to my aunt moving out. My cousin, we'll call him Johnny, had passed away 5 years prior. He had lived in this house his whole life. He had mainly stayed in the basement, and he loved the house. Fast forward a few years, and I was driving my then 2-year-old sister around the 3-acre yard on a golf cart. I stopped at the end of the field to look at something on my phone. There was a bunch of junk sitting in the edge of the woods surrounding the back part of the yard. This included the truck of my now deceased cousin, Johnny. My sister then eerily pointed to the truck and whispered to me, "That's Johnny's truck. Johnny really misses his truck." I looked at her smiling up at me and drove the cart back up to the house as fast as it would go. My sister wasn't supposed to know who Johnny was, let alone know whose truck that was. What makes this even creepier is that an hour before that, she had come up from the basement to eat and told my mother and I about her friend John that was in the basement with her. No one ever talked about Johnny around my sister, and once more, there was no way she could have known whose truck that was. Only his friends ever called him Johnny as well. I still get chills when I'm in that basement, or I go around the field and see that truck. My sister doesn't remember any of this, but I wouldn't expect her to, seeing as she was so young. 4. The Soldier in the Basement by Kristyn C. and read by Shaded Masters.
I lived in an old military housing on a US Army post in Alaska. The basement was super creepy. Every time you stepped on the third to the last step, you had an overwhelming feeling to look over to the basement. It was so strong that no matter how hard you tried, you couldn't ignore the pull to look over. Every single time you did, you would see a soldier in a Vietnam-era uniform hanging from the basement rafters. I will say he was a very kind spirit. He was always watching over my son. My son nearly died when he was 11 months old, and the spirit woke me up, demanding I go check the baby. I thought I was dreaming, so I ignored it until our German shepherd started biting my wrist to wake me up and starts dragging me to my son's bedroom. I got him to the hospital in time, and even though he spent a week in the hospital, he's almost 12 and healthy now. The same spirit seemed to be very protective of me as well. My ex-husband was abusive, but while we lived in that house, he never touched me. Every time he would even raise his voice to me, he said he felt this very heavy and angry presence around him, staring him down, almost daring him to do something. The one time he raised his hand to me, a picture frame came flying off the wall, hitting him in the head with enough force to give him a nasty gash requiring stitches. I feel like the spirit of the soldier came home and found out his wife left him and took their child. I feel like it destroyed him and he took his own life. He was very protective and I hated seeing him hanging, so I told him one day it hurt me to see him that way, and he never showed himself to me in that form again. My ex-husband saw him like that every time he went to the basement. The day we moved out, I went down to say goodbye, and when we left I saw him standing in the dining room window waving goodbye. It was almost like leaving a dear friend. I always wonder if he finally crossed over and went to the light.
5. A Refrigeration Technician Horror Story by Demetrius. I am a refrigeration repair service tech. This was about 5 years ago when I was called in to fix a customer's refrigerator. Before arriving, I called the customer as I always did to confirm with him that I was on my way. Once I got there, I pulled my service van into the driveway and got my tool bag. Then I began to walk to the front door, after which I rang the bell. I stood there for about a minute when an older man opened the door. I said to him, "Hello, sir, I'm the service technician you called." He looked me up and down and eventually said, "Oh yes, come on in." Once I was in the house, I was expecting to go to the kitchen, but the older man told me that he had another refrigerator in the basement. He led the way down to the basement stairs and to a long white chest cooler. I asked him what seemed to be the problem. He says it's just not getting as cold anymore. I opened up the chest refrigerator and I was instantly bombarded with a terrible smell. But I figured it was from the spoiled meat that may have gone bad from the refrigerator breaking down. It was something I've smelled 100 times. The first thing I noticed was the meat in plastic bags, not transparent Ziploc bags, but brown and white plastic bags. I couldn't see what was in them. As I started pulling all the bags out one by one, I got to one bag that was clear, and what I saw through caught me off guard. It was very obviously a cat. All the bags on closer inspection had cats in them, and the one that was clear, I told the old man, "Sir, why do you have bags of cats in your freezer?" He took the bag from me and looked at it. Then he said to me, "Oh, that's my daughter's cat. It passed away a few months back." He went on to say that he still hadn't told his daughter yet because she was away at college. He said that those were all his cats, all of them that he's ever owned. I just stopped everything right there, and I told the man I can't work on his refrigerator at the moment, and he'll have to reschedule. Once I got back in my work van, I called my office and told them what had happened. They said they don't blame me for not wanting to work on that refrigerator, and told me to go off to the next job. I'll never forget that day. How there are people out there that keep once living things in their freezers, and not for food. I've been a refrigeration service tech for 18 years, and I've seen some very terrible things. Let me know if you want to hear more. 6. The Resident by Pantrybarn. and read by Shaded Masters.
One of my good friends in the 7th or 8th grade was named Chris, and his mum was kind of kooky. She had angel statues and crystals all over the house and would tell us things like she saw Arabs, her words, messing with her car in the middle of the night, and the next day the car didn't work. Chris and I were both pretty sure that she had some mental issues, and we would kind of brush off stories like this. Anyway, she told us several times that someone lives under the house, in the crawl spaces. I remember one night in particular that I was staying over and I heard noises under the floor. Chris was asleep and I figured it was raccoons or cats or something under the house. Chris moved away to live with his dad. His parents were separated. His mum stayed in that house, but Chris and I stayed in touch. I met up with him a few years ago and he told me that his mum recently moved out of the house. She had a few things stored under the house, so she had Chris go into the crawl space and get them. He told me he found a sleeping bag, open cans of food, magazines, clothing, etc. It looked like whoever was under there had left a long time ago, but it turned out that his mum wasn't making it up.
7. Elmo by Jess. Me and Jay have been best friends since 4th grade, and from as far back as I can remember, Jay has told me many weird things that happen around his house. When his family moved in, they discovered that the previous owner was a sniper from World War II. His name had been Elmo, and they found classified documents in the attic about the work he had been assigned to. As time went on, Jay's mom had given birth to a sister. After bringing her home, they immediately began to experience happenings around the house, particularly in the basement. One story that really stood out to me was a happening on Father's Day. Jay was very young at the time, maybe around 7. He had forgotten to make something for his dad. He got up early in the morning to draw his dad a picture. His bedroom was right next to the kitchen, and there was a small hallway that connected the kitchen and living room. One of the walls in the hallway had an entryway to the basement. Jay grabbed his crayons and sat at the kitchen counter facing the small hallway. He began to happily color away. At one point, he glanced at the hallway, and what he saw scared him so bad that he abandoned his drawing and ran straight into his room and hid under the covers. He didn't come out until everyone else in the family was awake. He had seen a dark figure standing right in front of the door leading to the basement. Being a little embarrassed about how he reacted, he decided to keep it to himself for a long time. But later that night, during dinner, Jay's little sister, who was around 3 at the time, said, "Daddy, who is that dark man I saw?" Jay looked up in surprise. There's no way that she knew about what he had seen. He hadn't said a thing about it. His dad nudged Jay. It's probably good old Elmo." Jay nervously laughed along, not letting his dad know that he had seen the same thing that his young sister had. A month passed by, and Jay had forgotten about the incident. His uncle was staying at their house for a while because he was moving into a new apartment close by, and he was waiting for his stuff to get there. One day while they were at school and his uncle was at the house alone, his dad remembers getting a frantic phone call from his brother. When he picked up, Jay's uncle started screaming about how there was someone in their house, that he saw something coming from the basement. Now, years later, Jay and I started dating, and I quickly got caught up on these stories. Now, whenever I'm over at his house, especially in the evening, I tend to try to stay away from that hallway, and especially the basement. But still, I swear I can feel someone watching me. 8. The Basement by Katie, and read by Shaded Masters.
I am not a stranger to the paranormal. Ever since I was 12, I noticed we were not alone in this world. The story I am sharing is not my first experience, but the scariest so far. I was 16 at the time. Due to my parents being divorced, I had to go see my father every other weekend. He recently moved to a new rental. This rental was a bit of a story. You see, the previous owner of it just let his animals die. He would always find bones in the yard. Being in the countryside gave me very little things to do, and outside was not an option, due to the landlord's business being run on the same lot. Shortly, my right to stay upstairs in the living room was taken away by my stepmother. My room became my sanctuary. My room was in the basement. As time went on, I started to notice a presence near my room. The presence slowly grew over time, but never bothered me during the day. I would always forget about it as I went to bed, but the presence was stronger when all the lights were off. I slowly became paranoid, so I turned on my favourite rock station to ease my nerves each night. Then the presence became overbearing. I made the mistake of looking at my door as I tried to sleep. Through the crack, a bright golden orb appeared. I blinked, thinking I was just tired. The orb slowly turned into an eyeball. I made contact with a creature's eye. The malice that came from that one contact was enough to force me to stay awake all night. The creature just stayed there, watching me. Each time I would move, the eye would follow. I could not turn on the lights, for the switch being right next to that door. Being the fool I was, I forgot my cell phone charger at my mum's house. I was not able to reach my father. I was frozen in fear. No one would be able to help me. I was awake for what seemed like days. Not sleeping well the night before did not help me at all. I started to hallucinate without knowing. The laughter from the hallucination brought me back to reality. I was seeing spiders everywhere. This was a great shock due to my extreme fear of spiders. That is when I knew I had to get out of there. Not having a flashlight, I took a weird disco stick I got at some event. I ran for the door and turned on the lights. The creature was still there, but I had to get upstairs. The fear was getting worse by the second. I swing the door open and run for the stairs. The automatic lights turned on as I ran up. I fumbled as I opened the door to the upstairs. Dread began to fill up. Once in the upstairs, I slammed the door shut, locking it in the process. I looked out the front window to see the sun beginning to rise. The aftershock from the event kept me awake. I sat on the couch with a blanket on me. I double-checked that all the doors were locked. Not that that would help with anything, but it helped my mind calm down a little bit. I was out before my father got up, and they were all shocked to see that I was on the couch. I told them something was up with the basement, but they never believed me. I would never get enough sleep for 3 months after the incident, but my father got a divorce and lives in a better place. Recalling this experience is not kind to me, nor my memory. The only event that is still completely vivid is that golden eye through the small crack of my door. I never felt fear like that before. I honestly have no clue what that thing was or what it wanted with me. Who knows how long it had its sights on me. I will give my deepest sympathy to who lives there now, but hopefully my old bedroom is just a storage space like most basements should be.
9. Possible Ghost in My Basement by Shane O. This experience happened to me about 5 or 6 years ago. Some of the details may not be there, but here goes. I just recently moved about 6 months ago. I now live in a development fairly close to my old place, and it was on a corner of a fairly busy street. I moved for reasons unrelated to this story. I'm 15 years old, and this happened when I was about 10. My brother 8, my cousin 12, and I were all in my small, musty, cluttered basement, playing around with toys because we were bored. Literally, out of nowhere, we heard a toy fall from the other end of the room. Now, there was no breeze or gust, just the fan blowing on us from this side of the room because it was very musty and humid down there, and from what I can remember, both the windows were closed. As we were all fairly young, we scared easily. I suggested we go outside and play basketball or something, because I wasn't comfortable at this point. They agreed, and we began to walk up the stairs, but not before we heard a box of toys fall off another shelf, out of a box that was previously closed. Now the fan was indeed facing the box of toys, but the box fell toward the fan. My cousin said run, and we sprinted up the stairs, making sure to lock the door behind us, and that was it, save for the sound of child's laughter coming from the basement once we were gone. We looked at each other and ran outside. I believe that if there was a spirit, it didn't have the intent on harming us. Maybe it was just wanting to scare us for a joke. 10. The Basement at My Grandparents' House by Fearwolf224 and read by Shaded Masters.
When I was between 5 and 7, I used to love my grandparents' house. I spent a lot of time with them in their home. Their home was a 2-story, 4-room house. Old, of course, but anyway, there was a basement they said to never go into. I looked to them, so I usually never went in there and trusted their word. One day, on a weekend night, when I was around 7 or 8, I was at their house alone because they were getting pizza as usual. I was watching TV and eating some food left over, but then there was a big, loud knock from below me. I thought nothing of it because it was an old home and made creaks and other strange sounds. About 2 minutes later it came again. Again I dismissed it as an old house noise. When it came again about 2 minutes later, I became worried. I curled up on the sofa with a blanket and just tried to focus on the TV. Then the knocking came from the basement door in the kitchen. It was a frantic knocking, like someone was trying to escape. I started crying because it was nighttime and I was scared and someone was knocking. Then I heard something like a door breaking down. Then the house went silent. I was crying really bad now and under the blanket, hiding myself. It was very cold in the house and the TV was now turned off. I turned it off so as not to draw attention to myself. The silence was horrible. When I heard the doorknob turn on the main door, I nearly jumped. It was my grandparents, and when they saw me crying, they asked what was wrong. I told them everything, and my grandpa looked at the basement door. Then he said, "It's good that you didn't open that door."
Sometimes it's best to just stay out of the basement. Besides being old, dark, and damp, apparently, they can be the home of many types of horrors, from venomous spiders to lurking spooks. The next time you go into your deep, dark basement, you never know what you'll find. You never know if you'll even come back out. Good night. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And please, if you enjoyed Shaded Masters' work, click the link in the description and subscribe to her channel. Thanks for the help today, Shaded Masters. If you want to hear your stories in a video, you can go to darknessprevails.org/submit. If you want to support my channel, you can download my free app Spooked off the Google Play Store. Think about donating $1 a month on Patreon and get your name in the credits of these videos. That's at patreon.com/darknessprevails. Or if you've got some extra cash and you want an awesome shirt, go to morbidmonsters.com. Now, as usual, here are my 5 favorite early comments from the previous video about 5 creepy daycare stories. Kristyn Hunt says, "Darkness Prevails, do you know if these are true? And by the way, you're my favorite narrator. You're the first and last voice I hear." I wish I knew if these were all true or not, but that's what I chose to specialize my channel on. I'd rather hear people's stories out from all over the world, sort of like that old sci-fi show, Beyond Belief, Fact or Fiction. we all get together around and decide for ourselves while enjoying a creepy story. Like heck, we are anxiously waiting, says, I'm firstish. Great timing, love. You were first, congratulations. And I thought that emoji was a butt. Beautiful. King Crouton says, Darkness ASMR. Yeah, pretty much, I guess. But let's not get freaky with it. Dark Gaming says, oh snap, my uncle works at a daycare. Hopefully he's not one of those creepy uncles from the daddy daycare. And Luna Noir says, I'm currently sick. Listening to Daddy Darkness and Uncle Unit helps me feel better. Whoa, I just realized the whole family's there. All the dudes at least. But I know we've got an anti-creep somewhere, and now we've got a sister Shaded. This is a really weird and creepy family. Anyways guys, that brings us to the end of this video. More are coming soon, so stay tuned. Here are the credits to my patrons who continue to donate, like the hardcore baddies they are. Until next time, stay safe out there, and stay creepy.